Gen X did not choose horror. Horror chose us. And that's not just a dramatic statement. There is a behavioral science explanation for why our generation has a relationship with fear that no other generation shares. And once you understand it, you can't unsee it. Before we get into the science, let me frame exactly what we're talking about. Gen X, those of us who were roughly born between the years of 1965 and 1980, grew up during what I call, or what I consider, the golden era of horror. We had Halloween, Friday the 13th, Poltergeist, The Thing, Hellraiser. Those were not just background noise for us. They were events. And a lot of us were watching these films at a very young age, much younger than we should have been watching them. And that right there is actually the first piece of the puzzle. Because it wasn't just that we watched horror, it was when we watched it, why we watched it, and what was happening in the world around us while we did. I'm going to break down into 3 behavioral science concepts. By the end of this video, you're going to be able to understand your relationship with horror on a level you probably haven't before. Here's what's happening to your brain when you watch a horror film. Fear is a stimulus. It's processed by your amygdala, which is the structure in your brain that controls your fight or flight response. When you're watching a horror film, your brain processes it as something that's really happening, that you're really watching when you're really watching. But it's like it can't tell the difference between it being real or fake. You're sitting on the couch in your home, or you're inside of a movie theater with a bunch of other people watching the film. So once it's done, you're safe. You survived. And what that does is your brain starts to learn, and it begins to associate that fear response with a reward, because every single time you survive, your amygdala builds a tolerance, and more importantly, it starts to seek the feeling out over and over and over again. Behavioral scientists calls that the conditioned response. Now, when it comes to Gen X, specifically for my generation, this conditioning happened to us during a critical developmental window. Our brains were in peak neuroplasticity, the most receptive period for being rewired. We weren't just watching horror casually. We were building a neurological framework around it. That right there is why Gen X doesn't just like horror, we are wired for it. Gen X grew up in a different cultural climate, very different than any other generation. We were the generation of the stranger danger, the milk carton showing children that were missing, unexplained mysteries in prime time, and we were latchkey kids, taking care of ourselves, being very independent. And some of us, like myself, had to watch our younger siblings while our parents were away. We had serial killers, nuclear anxiety, the AIDS crisis. These are all real horrors that we grew up with, that we watched on the evening news every night. And a lot of times we'd be all by ourselves from between hours typically of between 3 and 6. That is an ambient fear needed somewhere to go. And the thing about fear is, as a stimulus, it doesn't evaporate. It has to be contained. And for Gen X, horror films were our containers. They gave us a controlled environment to process the anxiety of living in the world we lived in. When you watch a horror film and the killer's right there on the screen, that's a specific, containable fear. You can see it. You know where it is. And that's almost a relief because it's not the vague, shapeless anxiety of wondering whether the world is as dangerous as every adult around you keeps implying that it is. Behavioral scientists call this anxiety displacement. You take a diffuse, unresolvable fear and you place it onto something you can watch, you can process and survive. Gen X didn't just love horror, we needed it. It was doing psychological work for us that nothing else was doing. Before we get to the third piece, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. I'm S.O. Yarbrough. I have a master's degree in applied behavioral science, and every week I'm going to be breaking down the psychological aspects of different characters from film and TV that we love. So hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The third piece of the puzzle is something that's called the Zeigarnik Effect. It's essentially stating that the psychological aspect of having an open loop is something that lives in your memory that you're always coming back to because it's enclosed. It's just left open and you keep returning to it over and over again, attempting to close them. Now think about the horror films that has haunted you. Were they the ones that resolved, clean, and had a nice, satisfying ending? Or was it something that was ambiguous and left open? And your mind just couldn't figure out what to do to close it, to get rid of that fear that you had. Let's take a look at the original Halloween. When it ends, Michael Myers just simply disappears. And it's an open loop. It didn't close. So you're still sitting there like, oh, Michael, he's still out there. Those are the kind of films that like leave you just fearful. There's some of the new stuff like Hereditary that if you've seen it, you know what I'm saying. Poltergeist leaves you the same way. The feeling that whatever was in the house isn't entirely gone. And that right there is kind of some of the reasons why the Zeigarnik the Zeigarnik effect it is designed that way. It's an open loop, and it leaves your brain searching for a way to close it. Your brain hates to have this open aspect of anything, something that just not hasn't finalized and there's no resolution, and that stays like that. And for Gen X, we were absorbed exactly with these kind of films. We were growing up while in our very like I stated, that developmental window in our brains. And that's what it created a mnemonic anchor. And that's the deep emotionally tagged memory wired directly to our horror as a genre. So we got neurologically embedded with these films. And that is not nostalgia, that's behavioral science. So when someone asks me, why does Gen X love horror? Why don't we just watch it but evangelize it? We build careers around it. We return to it across decades. Here's the behavioral science answer. We were conditioned during very pivotal developmental time of our lives to take in these types of films. Like I stated, we grew up, Gen Xers, we grew up in a very different time. We had to take care of ourselves for the most part. We were there all by ourselves a lot of times, and some of us watching younger siblings while our parents were away. We had to be, more independent than others, and we dealt with such horrors in real life. Like I said, the stranger danger, the missing children. We read about in the newspapers and seen on the news, and had, like I said, TV shows like Unsolved Mysteries that we watched. This was real life. It was more scary, really, than these horror films we were watching. And it wasn't never really about us being scared. It was about survival. These horror films, when we watched them, our brains were seeing it as, hey, we survived, we were safe. And we had to have some way to practice being safe, to practice surviving, because we had to do it on our own. And we had such, anxiety growing up. And that's why we are just different. We're built different. Gen Xers, we're built different. And we are the generation that learned to survive no matter what. Let me know in the comments, what's the horror film that has lived in your head the longest? The one you keep returning to even now. I read every single one. And if you want to go deeper into the psychology of specific characters and exactly what behavioral science says about the way they're built, there are 2 videos on screen right now to start with. Talk to you on the next episode.